Hey, it's Sarah Burke here from the Women in Media podcast. And before we get started on a new episode, could I get you to hit like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell, whichever app you do your podcast listening in. Make sure you're all set up so you know when there's a new episode and you can help spread the word. Oh, and if you're so inclined, could I ask you to leave a review if the app that you're using does that? You're the best. All right, let's get to the show. Josie Dye is a Canadian radio and TV personality, currently the leading female host on CIND-FM in Toronto on Indie 88. Now, before you go ahead and conclude this was an easy first episode because Josie and I are colleagues at Indie 88 and former employees of Chorus Entertainment and The Edge here in Toronto, there's definitely a reason that this podcast starts here. When I was growing up, I used to listen to you, on this RCA boombox stereo that my parents had in the basement. I remember bringing it up to my room because I wanted to listen to you. You made me want to be on the radio. You gave me that first thought that I may want to do that.
Shut up.
Down the road.
Shut up. You know what? Of everything you just said, all I took from that was when I was a young kid listening to you. No, I'm joking. No, that's unbelievable. That's so sweet. Thank you so much for that because I've heard that from a few different women. And I think it's because, as I'm sure we'll get into in this podcast, when I was on the radio for a long time, I was the only female on my station. So if you were listening to CFNY and you were listening to Middays, I was the girl. Everybody else, for the longest time, it was just guys. So I really appreciate that you listened and that you decided to take this career.
What do you even remember thinking, like joining a team as one of the only females at that time?
I went in there with Kelly Catrera was there at the time, and on air, that was about it. It was just Kelly and I. But I had come from 99.9, and I had worked in an environment where there was a lot of males as well. And you know what? It's interesting because I was such a huge fan of CFNY, but then when I got into radio, it was almost as if that was not the path I thought I was going to take. So when I got that job, it was super exciting. Definitely intimidating would be the word that I would use. Bookie and I always used to remember that moment where I walked in the room with this like young girl, blonde hair from Pickering, Ontario. And I met Bookie and he was so cool, right? And he was just this image of everything I wanted. Like he knew all about indie rock and he just had so much confidence and people gravitated towards him. But what we realized later in our careers is that we were very similar. We were both just eccentric people. And so it just took a while for people to understand that, I wasn't this, how can you put it, as they like to label some women, just a normal blonde girl, right? Like as they use that word to describe a female. I found my place and it was a lot of fun working there.
Who made you want to get into radio?
Well, there's a lot of people. I've always said Maie Pauts because she was also the midday girl that worked at CFNY. Isn't that hilarious how that's the way it works? It's the one girl who has that one position. I definitely used to listen to her and used to record myself over top of her between songs when I was at home in my bedroom. I did it. I really still think I have those tapes. And one day when I get a tape deck, I need to go through them. But my dad also gave me some really good advice. And he was always like, I really wanted to be a singer and I wanted to do something in music. And I come from a very musical family. And he said, if you want to be a singer, you'll be a singer, but you need a backup plan. So broadcasting was kind of my backup plan. Thank God, because singing didn't really work for me.
I don't think anyone in this day and age would say pick broadcasting as a backup plan. So that's funny too.
I know. But yeah, that was my backup plan.
So what are those qualities that Maie Pauts had that you were intrigued by?
She was a female on the radio. She is such a lovely woman. She had an incredible voice. She was knowledgeable. She was interesting. And at the same time, she was fun. But I mean, really, as I mentioned, she was the only female on the station that was on there. Thank God she was so brilliant and so good at her job that she became like a role model for me. But yes, there was not a lot of people to listen to at the time when I was listening.
Would you say you have felt empowered for your entire career?
No, not at all. I've had moments of empowerment for sure. and I've had people in my life who've empowered me. And I've accomplished things that I'm so proud of. And I just wish that, I could sing them from the rooftops of some of the things that I've accomplished. But there were a lot of challenges, and there were a lot of times where I had to take a different path to get to where I wanted to get to. And I think that I was able to do that because of my upbringing and because of my the landscape of my family, which is probably very different from most people. So I grew up in a family where my father was the stay-at-home dad and my mom was the worker. And she built an empire. And that takes, from both parties, that takes a lot of sacrifice in the time that, I guess in the 80s and the 90s, that took a lot of sacrifice because my dad, I'm sure his friends sort of snickered at the idea that my mom was the breadwinner. And he used to brag about it, to everyone. I remember him bragging, "Oh, the wife makes the money," in the way that they talked about women back in the day. So I came from a very non-traditional family, and I had a businesswoman as a mom who gave me so much advice. And I don't think necessarily her advice is the right advice, but she gave me advice that worked for her. And she is, in her mid 70s and is still running 3 businesses. My dad is on payroll as the handyman, and he is. And I am really impressed at the way I was raised because it's not the norm. It's very unusual to find a situation like my own.
So those moments of empowerment that you did have throughout your career, what did they all have in common? What are the tools that you need to feel empowered in your job?
Well, I think obviously confidence is a huge thing, and it's hard to have confidence in such a competitive industry that we're in and such a personal industry that we're in because, we basically throw our lives out on the radio every single day. So what we need good management. And that's always been the case. I think it's undervalued management, how important management is. I had an incredible manager, Ross Winters, who saw in me something I think that no other manager saw. I saw a work ethic, but also saw talent. And he let me run. That's what he let me do. He let me do what I do. And if you let me do what I do, and this is something as women that it's really hard for us to brag about ourselves, but it's something that needs to happen, is I am an incredible employee. I'm just going to say that right there. I am an incredible employee. And I think anyone who has me as who is a management ask at Indy, I think I work hard. I'm a hard worker, and it's because I love it. I live and breathe for work. I don't know if that's what should happen, but I do. So when I'm empowered and when I'm given the tools to do what I want to do, I go and I don't stop. So an example is the top 20 that I did. I wanted to have a syndicated show across Canada, and I was told no one wants a syndicated show. Syndication is going. This is
look at it now.
I know, right? This is 10 years ago now. And I made the show on my own with Adam Kescametti, who helped me out, and Tara Giuseppe. And the 3 of us kind of really worked hard on it. And from there, Ross Winters allowed me to go and approach other managers, not just at Chorus, but in other countries and in other companies. And I got this show on 13 radio stations, and it felt so good. And people were begging to have the show on the air. And I think that's just Ross letting me do what I do, which was amazing.
You just touched on confidence. So I want to bring this up, and please know that what I'm about to say means nothing now. I know you respect me now. We've got a great relationship now. But there was once a time where I sort of felt always like brushed off or like you didn't have the time of day for me. And I think back to what you just described was going on in your career, being at the peak, and the place where I was feeling really insecure. I was hosting a drive show in a medium market, wondering if I would ever make it to the major market. And there's so much competition. And I just think that this is a very common narrative in the brain of any woman in the media. Don't you think?
Of course. And that makes me feel so horrible because you know what? I don't remember that. So you know me now, right? Like there's no way.
I bring this up though, because I think we were both a product of our environments at that time. I'm laughing about it now. Like, look at us now.
I think we have, and I think that's a really good point. And I think that the work that needs to be done is on our part as well. It's not like, I think that this idea, this concept of women in radio, I think men look at it as, is this a bashing time for us to bash men? When in actual fact, it's not. We use these words amongst each other. We use bitchy towards each other. We use, we're catty, we're, aggressive or bossy or towards each other. And I think that a lot of that plays in the idea that it is so competitive because there used to only be a specific amount of jobs, right? There was only one or two females on a radio station. So it was, do or die at the time. Now, that being said, I have a lot of girl friends in this industry, and I love my relationships with the women in this industry. And I think we've got some really good ones. Mel is a perfect example. Mel and I were pit against each other so often. Actually, it was more probably like Fred and I, because it was always either Josie got something or Fred got something, right?
As the two drive hosts.
As the two drive hosts or the morning show, or it was very hard for us to manage a friendship throughout that, because the environment that Chorus gave us was always like, it's you against them. They actually called it the Hunger Games. They said to us, I'm not kidding. They put us in a room and said, well, I'm glad the Hunger Games are over. And, oh, look who came out on top. Like, it was such a bad environment. And Mel is a perfect example because her and Fred were teamed up a lot. We weren't best friends at Edge. We didn't hate each other, but we weren't best friends. Now you look at it as indie in a positive environment where we're beside each other. And I'm sitting here going, I can't wait to go back to work so I can hang out with Mel and have a drink with her. You know what I mean? Or we can just be together and it doesn't matter who's on top or who's in what position. It's not like that anymore. And I think that stems from the environment you're put in. If you're put in an environment, a toxic environment where you're always competing for that one role, then it's hard. Really, really hard.
At that time, I think I was being told the narrative, that we have both heard many times. Oh, there's never going to be two females back-to-back shows on the radio station.
Of course.
And all of those things like, oh, you want to make it to the big market? Well, so-and-so's already there. And so-and-so's already doing that,
for sure.
But, I think the positive environment that you're bringing up at Indie 88 and positive management and teamwork and all of that plays into, I think, how much we have both evolved based on our environments over the last few years. For sure.
That's the thing, right? Now it's, I think it's also, it is, you're right. It is confidence. It is, we could each look at that situation completely different. And I don't remember the interaction with you, or we could look at it in a way, in a different side of how you're feeling, right? Which is a totally different story.
When I think about that time now, I don't think for 2 seconds that you were like trying to give me the cold shoulder, but it was, I'm talking about that confidence I didn't have yet at that time is what I was trying to get at. Yeah. So talk to me about your current role at Indie 88. You are now the female lead on a morning show in a major market. And
oh my God, it's so fun.
I don't want to say as like someone who's like come up underneath you in radio, I don't want to say I'm proud of you, but I'm so proud of what you have accomplished.
It's great. When I first went over there, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what they would allow me to do and what they wouldn't allow me to do. Oftentimes you hear you have a morning show, but then it's like, well, what does that mean? And at Indie, they give you the freedom to do what you want. And they put me in a team. It's not my show. It's myself, Matt, and Carlin. Like the three of us are a team and there's a respect there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful environment. And, I think that, and I think that means everything. It gives you the creative control. They did what Ross let me do, is that they're allowing me to do what I want and run with it in a way of, the sock drive and what we've accomplished with the sock drive and the millions of socks that we've been able to donate. And then Music Counts, the $90,000 that we were able to give Music Counts after Bookie passed. And just the way we were allowed to appreciate a broadcaster on the radio like Bookie after he passed, and what they allowed us to do. They allowed us to go all day just playing Bookie music, which I don't think we would ever get away with that at any other station. And it's also the positive environment, whereas I'm playing Fortnite right now with Brent and Carlin when we're not at work. Or I just text Mel and I was like, when are we having our walking dates? And I just go for a walk and she'll go for a walk and we'll call each other
Yeah.
on the phone. And then there's the two of us that have had a really good relationship. I know you're not at Indy right now, but over the last couple of years. So it's really nice. It's a really nice environment.
And I will say that when I joined the Indy team, I felt that warmth from you and Mel right away. And it's not that I didn't feel that warmth from you guys at the edge, but it was just very different. It was a different playing field. Yeah.
It was a different playing. And listen, I don't want to say the edge is that way now because I don't know what the edge is now. And there's all new management, right? And the management at the time, I really do respect each person individually. I just think it was the environment that we were in, the competitive environment.
Everyone is trying to fulfill a role of some sort. And I think we both respect all of our previous bosses for sure.
Yeah.
In their own ways. So I wanted to talk to you about maternity leave. And I know you've got, your kids in the other room and you're not just dealing with any kids. You have a special needs kid at home. And I do want to talk to you about your podcast before we get off here. But I wanted to talk to you about your decision to become a mother and how that affected, your career. Did you have any reservations about becoming pregnant because of your role in the media?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. And I think that's because of my family background, because I saw what my mom accomplished with 2 children and I knew I could do it. I knew that I would be able to do what she did. And she did a lot with 2 kids at home. So I didn't have any reservations. I always wanted to have kids. It was just something I always wanted. And I don't, there are a lot of words that need to be adjusted, like a working mom, you never hear about working dads. So for me, I had my mat leave. And obviously the first time I had my child, I had a really sick child. And I went back to work quite early because the opportunity for a morning show came up. My child was in the hospital for 4 months and I was back at month 6 to come back to the edge. And I came back and I did a morning show that did not work, which we can get into later if you want. Lots to talk about with that. And then the second time I went on mat leave, I decided I needed a longer mat leave. I'd at least give myself 8 months, only because I was dealing with a child who I had just got a diagnosis for, I think months before I became pregnant with my second. And so I had a lot on my plate and I knew that this time I needed the extra time. And everyone has a different way of looking at things, right? I mean, I think that it depends on who you are and what position you're in. I think a lot of this has to do with the failed morning show that I was in initially. I kind of need to tell the story in order to tell you how I felt. But I was in a morning show with 2 other people, but one other main host. And at the time, I didn't think that he related to our audience. I had been there for 15 years and I didn't think this morning show was going to work out. Because of that, I made an attempt to end it. And I called the program director and I said, I knew I was going to either sync with this morning show or I was going to get off of it. So I said, I don't think this is going to work. And at the time I said that I was actually in the parking lot of K-Rock in LA because I was ready to just leave. I didn't know how else to get out of the morning show. And my boss at the time, Dave Farrow, said, come on back. I agree. We're going to fix this. And what ended up happening is that morning show broke up. From then, Dave moved on and there were different bosses, but it seemed like once you have a failed morning show, it's almost like you have this scarlet A that's on you. Take out the sexualization of it, but you're the one who's being ostracized for something that you did wrong, but you're still living in that building that you're in. And everyone is kind of worried about the conversation they have with you. Meanwhile, the person who initially, and this is my perspective, initially, didn't work out on the morning show was being given opportunities. It was a really hard time. And that's when I went on mat leave. So I went on the second mat leave during that time after a failed morning show. And I went for 8 months and I came back to a 1-hour show on the radio. Now, Ross McLeod gave me the 1-hour show and I truly, truly believe that Ross thought it was the best thing for me. I think he thought it was going to be an amazing, cool gig. Like we were going to make this, put a press release out. And I think he thought this was going to be the most unbelievable thing. But for myself, it just was not what I wanted.
It wasn't enough
It
to
wasn't enough.
fulfill.
Yeah. And I am, if you know me, and I just don't think Ross and I knew each other very well at that time. I think he probably knows me a lot better now. But if you know me, I'm not the type of person to do a 1 hour show a day. I'm like, give me 12 hours of work and I'm satisfied and I'll do it really well. Give me 1 hour and I'll do a shit job. You know, like I need more. I need more. And that was the moment I decided that I can't stay and do this. And that's when indie came for me. And God, you know, I always thought I would live with that A on my shirt. I always thought I was tainted after one failed morning show. It's really hard. And Indy, who I didn't know anyone, I kind of knew who Mike was at the time, who works
The
with
music
us,
director, yeah.
I kind of knew him through friends, but I didn't really know him. And Christina, who was the program director at the time, had worked with my former morning show host and kind of sort of understood where I was coming from a little bit, understood the situation. And I think they just saw something in me when I was on that morning show. And they realized I think I was not given a great deal. So that's when they came for me. Awesome.
And you know what? Like, let's remember too that you were at your like career all-time high, feeling very empowered right before everything unraveled with this morning show. And I think this speaks to a lot of the roller coasters that women go through in the media, because you might feel great one moment, but the next day it can change at a moment's notice.
Yeah. And whether that's women or men, I don't know. I don't know if that's a woman.
It's an industry thing.
It's an industry thing. It's a completely an industry thing. And there's a lot of times when it isn't a woman thing. There are some times when it is. When I left Chorus, it was incredibly amicable when they thought I was staying. So there was like a push and pull, where there was some offers and I was going to stay. Where they'd given me all of a sudden, the A was gone. You know, Indy wants me. And they were like, okay, we'll give you everything you want. We'll give you a morning show. We'll give you TV. I was already doing TV, but we'll give you a better TV role. They were going to give me everything on a silver platter. It was unbelievable. It's like, how does it take another morning show or another station to come? And that's just the industry as well. That's nothing to do with a woman. But here's one thing I think that kind of hurt. So I eventually said no. And I just eventually decided I'm not going to take the ex-boyfriend back. I'm going to move on. And I'm going to find someone new. And Indy's going to be there. And it's really hard to do that because I had been there for 15 years with I had put money into a pension and I was happy there. But I was going to leave. I was going to go to Indy. And they said before I left, my TV department said, your TV is secure. We have a separate contract. You're staying in TV. We love you in TV. I worked really hard in TV and 2 months after I left, they told me that my TV was gone. And I think that is the part that hurt. I think that really hurts because I can count on my hand for men, Ross being one of them who I completely respect and no fault of his own either. He has, radio and one network TV in another. And I think they played on my emotions a bit there. And I think they knew the guilt that I felt leaving Chorus. It should have just been a business decision. It should have just been like, hey, I'm going because I am making a business decision. But instead, I think there was a sense of I felt guilty for leaving them. Like I felt really bad that I hurt their feelings. So when they took away my TV, I didn't fight. I didn't fight for what I should have fought for. I should have fought for that. Like I had worked 8 years on my own television show, kind of like one of their faces for W Network. And I'd worked really hard. And then all of a sudden, because I left Edge to go to a competitor, they took my TV away. Now, a lot of people will say that's the industry, but then you can't just do that for one person and not do it for everybody else.
It's not the same across the board. Yeah.
It's not the same across the board. So there are 4 other men that are doing both radio and television in other networks, including Kiss, which I love Roz and good for him for keeping it. I should keep mine too. But at the time, Kiss was more of a competitor to Edge than Indy was. We were the little guys. We weren't at the time.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some, and I think that's my fault. I felt bad for them. I didn't take my mom's advice. This is business. And my mom's advice, and this is going to be, Sarah, kind of going back My mom is not an emotional person. I'm not an emotional person. And my mom always says, you have friends in your friend world, and then you have a business, and you have to run that business, and you have to play the way the guys play. And she's always said that to me, always. So there's a little bit of cutthroat there. She's like, if you don't get what you want, you find a way to get it in another way. You figure out a path to do it, and you do it. So I think I let my emotions take over during the exit at chorus. And I think that I feel really bad about that.
You basically ended up putting your hands in the air and saying fine and just walking away.
I didn't even fight it. I just said, fine. After 8 years of television, just take it away. I left to go to indie, just take it. And I probably should have fought that harder, knowing my TV department loved me and wanted to keep me.
And wanted to support you. Yeah. You know, your career goals evolve, right? And
Sure.
after becoming a syndicated radio host, it's like, what's next? What's my next step? And
Yeah.
what do I feel passionate about? What do I want to do? So where does that leave you now? You're in an empowered place at Indie 88, and you're hosting this morning show where you actually feel like you're part of a team that operates properly.
Yeah.
What about TV now?
Oh, I mean, I will get there. I will get there. It's a hard market right now with COVID, but I will get there. I was also thinking I was going to open up a sex club, and I was going to have like just make a ton of money off everyone's just need to party after COVID. I'm not kidding. I'm like the PGest girl in the world, but my friend and I were going to open like this no, I'm joking. Okay. A little bit of a joke there, but I don't know what's next. There's so much opportunity when COVID is over that I'm excited. I'm excited to do some really fun things. And the party angle is not necessarily off the table. I want to do something fun. I'm sure everyone feels the same way.
You know what? Let me quickly ask you about this too. So, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and this is not just in our industry, but with women in any industry right now. I think that they often end up being the person to be in direct contact with, you know, teachers and helping support the kids with school stuff during the day and all of that. How has that been for you, you know, during a pandemic, but also trying to still get up at the same time and do everything when you're at home?
I've had to go to my mom's house to broadcast because my parents are living up north right now, because I can't do it at home with children, with kids. I don't know if I've told you that I started a pod. So because my child is immune compromised, him and 4 other kids are doing school in my basement. So we hired a teacher, and because he needs socialization, he couldn't just do strict virtual. So we hired a teacher, and 3 neighbors and my 2 boys are in the basement learning. That's fun.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like you know, you figured it out though. You pivoted.
We figured out a way, right? That's it. We figured out a way, and to keep them safe, and they all wear masks, and they have a little desks that we made, and you just, you know, that's I think that you just got to figure it out. You just there's always a way. You just don't take one route. There's a million routes you can take.
As someone who's had such a ginormous presence on social media over the last 10 years, I will say, you know, looking at you from a distance on social media, if I take a step back, even though I know your story with your special needs kid, I don't feel like you have been talking about what's gone on with Cole the entire way. I feel like it's become more a part of your story publicly in the last few years than it has before. And I'm sure that comes with, you know, the struggles that you went through while you were figuring everything out and during diagnosis. What has made you want to share that story a little more now?
2 things. I think that my child is old enough now to understand what's happening to him. Like I think that he gets it. And I think that I felt my mom used to tell me when he was young, don't forget, when he's 17, he's going to listen back to this stuff. Is he okay with you talking about it? And I felt that was his story. And I felt like there was a, you know, it was private. Also, I think we were in a little denial. I mean, both of us have talked about this, Joel and I. For years, there was denial there. You get a diagnosis, but you don't really know what it's going to look like. And you don't know how it's going to go. We were also in the thick of it. Like it's been hard. Like I finally feel during COVID it's funny. We have to keep him so safe, but he's been so healthy this year because he hasn't been around, you know, a classroom of kids. And up until this year, we didn't have time to do anything else. Like we basically lived in and out of sick kids. We constantly lived in and out of there. And it was really hard. So I think we finally have seen, like, we've been able to breathe a little bit this year, which has been nice. And we also see the silver lining in it all. So, I don't think the outcome isn't going to be as grave as we thought it was going to be. I think he's pretty high functioning right now. So yeah.
Tell me about the podcast, Love and Special Needs, and the story that you're now sharing with parents who may be in a similar situation.
I knew I had a lot to tell people, especially other parents who are going through what we went through. I have a lot to talk about. I know that I'm able to do it as a broadcaster. We forget it's not just the medium of radio. We're storytellers. So there was nothing like that out. We have a Facebook group with people around the world. And I honestly, every week, a mom comes on there or a dad comes on there in tears because they can't cope and they just don't know what to do.
And you've been there.
Yeah, I've been there. And I've talked to doctors now that say that, shaking baby syndrome has been a huge issue with children with Soto syndrome because it's exhausting. They cry nonstop. Like, it's really hard to get your child to stop crying. So I felt like if I was going to talk about anything, I know so much about this. I know so much about medicine. And only, I am Dr. Google. I am not a trained doctor. My mom is in the healthcare field and that's what her businesses are, in healthcare. So I do have that help. So I thought, why not make a podcast? And I can't believe how it's only been a month. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't. You're giving me advice because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But already, I've had 1,000 downloads on my first episode, and it's,
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's really nice. And I'm getting emails daily from people from Brazil and the UK and Australia, and not just parents who have children with Soto syndrome, but parents who have children with special needs, because what people forget is mine's symptom-based. Well, Cole's is symptom-based. So a lot of times with any sort of rare disease, the symptoms end up being the same. So it ends up being hyptonia or choking issues or reflux or spine issues. So we can all kind of relate to those same things. And that's why I thought I'd start the podcast.
And you know what? On that note, this brings me to sort of where I wanted to wrap this up. And I've sort of alluded to it as we've been talking, but I think there was a time, if I may assume, that earlier in both of our careers, we were kind of just concerned with the climb, and that cutthroat environment maybe gave us a sense that we needed the most followers, the most popularity, the most likes, all of those things. And what I see now in your profile as a broadcaster is you are most concerned with being relatable and giving back. And I think it speaks volumes of the journey that you've had in media.
Yeah, it's true. And that's a really good thing to say, because the pressure is off a little bit. And it doesn't mean that I won't be fired next week, because I work in a morning show. So I know the struggles that you have when you work in a morning show, but I'm also confident in my talent now. I'm confident as a person. I have more depth. And I think that's another thing that people forget, is that when you're on the radio, you have to be able to have life experiences, right? You have to be able to talk about your life and other people's life and be vulnerable. And once you get that confidence, and once you've been in the industry for a long enough, you can do that and you can help others. So that's been a goal of mine for sure.
You've always been a great storyteller, but now you're killing it at telling your own story. I really respect everything you do. And I'm so happy that you were one of my first guests. And I look at what we both do now every week, and I'm amazed at both of us. So
thank you so much, Sarah. And you as well. This is going to be such a cool podcast. I'm so excited to listen to everyone's stories and to, learn. So it'll be really cool.
And as a pass off, can you name 3 women that you immensely respect in broadcasting, whose stories you think need to be told?
Julie Adam, for sure. I mean, she's somebody that I constantly watches what's happened to her and how she has persevered. Unbelievable story. That's definitely number one. I think Mel, I'm going to say, only because our stories have been so intertwined, right? The two of us have been put against each other so often. And she's gone through similar things. She also got pregnant and
has her own story to tell there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is some stories. She is such a great person to have on, if you could have on her on the show. And just specifically in media. So I have a friend, Cynthia Loyce, who is on The Social. Just an unbelievable woman. Every day she sends me not just material, but show prep.
That's the best.
Like she hands me show prep every day. Like that's the kind of woman she is, right? Where she's like, Josie, do you need help for your show today? Oh, let me just send you some show prep. I love her. And she's also had a big struggle, just the idea of working with 4 women together. It's funny because as we've said earlier, we've always been put against each other. Now put 4 women together and to try to make it work. And it does work. That's really hard to do, but they do it and they do it every single day and they argue every single day. And I love women and men, women who can argue with each other and then the next day it's fine. Yeah. And I've had a few women like that in my life, one being Kim Rossi. I should really give a shout out to. Kim and I did not see eye to eye on anything when we worked together. We were the complete opposites. And yet we one day figured out how to work together and then became friends. So I think the women who can understand that there's a lot of women out there that are different than you, but it just takes that moment to understand where they're coming from, appreciate their circumstance, and then move on together. Because we all need to be friends, because if we don't, we are going to let the men take over. So yeah, that's a huge thing.
What is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given in this industry? And it doesn't matter if it's from a man or a woman.
It was from a man, JJ Johnston. He said you had to be ready for luck. And I love that because it's true. It's, everyone's like, oh, they're so lucky they got this gig, or they're so lucky they were able to be at that right place at the right time. But people forget you also have to be prepared for that job. So right now, before you even have the opportunity of getting that job, make sure you're prepared. And that's what I did when I did my top 20. I had just messed up O Canada in front of 35,000 people. And the Canadian world was looking at, I say the world.
I remember that.
Some Americans. Canada was looking at me at the time, making fun of me on social media. And I was ready with a show in my back pocket. And because every province knew and was talking about me, it was a perfect opportunity for me to give them my top 20. And it worked. So I used a horrible situation and I made it wonderful, but I also was ready for luck. That me messing up O Canada was one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me. And as soon as I messed it up, the Tuesday after, it was a Sunday night, the Tuesday after, I got FM 96 on board. And then from there, I worked on Power and I went all through Canada calling PDs. And I was in the news, so they knew who I was. So it worked.
Okay, we're going to end things on this note. Thank you so much for being one of my first guests and sharing your story.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
This one time in Russia, I had boots with the fur and apple-bottom jeans before it was a thing.
This one time in Russia, my baba got mad at me for going out with wet hair.
This one time in Russia, I had to put on all the clothes in my suitcase because it was so cold.
And I should have listened to her because that same baba gave me a shot of vodka and a whole slice of lemon, rind and all, to cure my cold.
Well, if you're interested in these stories and more, come check us out at the Russian Sisters Podcast.
The Russian Sisters, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and at therussiansisters.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.